On the evening of April 7, 2024, the city of Ulan-Ude in the Republic of Buryatia, a place nestled in the vast stretches of eastern Siberia near the Mongolian border, was filled with applause, camera flashes, and the kind of electric excitement that only a major public celebration can bring. The Mrs. Buryatia beauty pageant, one of the most anticipated social events in the region, had reached its grand finale. Dozens of women had competed for months in various categories, each one representing a different face of modern Buryatia womanhood. When the judges announced the winner of the Mrs. Top Model title, the room erupted. The name called was Seseg Bainova, a 30-year-old mother of two, a small business owner, a woman who radiated warmth and confidence in equal measure. For one luminous night, Seseg stood at the center of everything she had worked toward. She accepted her crown with a wide smile, posed for photographs, held flowers that had not yet even begun to wilt. And then, just 4 days later, she was gone. What followed was one of the most haunting and deeply troubling disappearance cases to grip the Russian Far East in recent memory. A case that drew hundreds of volunteers into the streets, captured the attention of national television, and left investigators, families, and an entire community searching desperately for answers that seemed to slip further away with every passing week. On the evening of April 11, 2024, Seseg made a series of ordinary decisions that no one around her had any reason to question. She called her husband Boris, who was away on a work trip in the city of Khabarovsk, located more than 2,000 kilometers from home. She asked him to transfer some money for groceries, a routine request between a married couple managing a household on a tight budget. She told him she planned to spend the evening at home taking care of domestic responsibilities. Boris, reassured by the normalcy of the conversation, had no reason to worry. But as evening settled over the city, Seseg made a different choice. Rather than staying home that night, she decided to use her personal vehicle, a Mitsubishi Outlander, to pick up a few private ride-share fares. This was something she did from time to time, a side income that helped cover household expenses during months when the family business ran short. The children's clothing store she had opened in December 2022 required ongoing investment, and the family budget was often stretched thin. Boris knew about the taxi work, but had long expressed his discomfort with it, particularly when Seseg worked late into the evening hours. She always reassured him that she was careful, that she had everything under control, and that nothing could go wrong. By 8 o'clock that evening, she had left the apartment. By 9:30, her shift driving fares had wound down. Around 10 in the evening, she met up with a small group of friends for a brief and casual gathering over coffee. The mood was light and uncomplicated. After a short time together, everyone went their separate ways. Seseg told her friends she was heading home to her boys. She even called her two sons to let them know she would be back soon. That phone call to her children would be one of the last times anyone who loved her heard her voice. Instead of turning toward home, Seseg drove her Outlander toward the Absolut shopping center, a well-known commercial complex in the city. Surveillance cameras in the area captured footage of her vehicle arriving in the parking lot. A man approached and got into the car. For approximately an hour, Seseg and this unidentified individual remained inside the vehicle together. Then a second person joined them. Shortly after, the Outlander pulled out of the parking lot and drove in the direction of a residential area known locally as the Sotnai district, a collection of neighborhoods on the edges of the city. After that moment, no one reported seeing Seseg Bainova again. And alongside the mystery of her disappearance, another name quietly emerged, that of a young man named Stanislav Arbov, 20 years old, who had also vanished without explanation around the same time and in circumstances that appeared to intersect with Seseg's own. To understand the full weight of what this disappearance meant, it helps to know who Seseg was, not as a headline or a case number, but as a person. She was born on July 8, 1993, in the small rural settlement of Tashir in the Selenjinsky district of Buryatia, a quiet corner of the republic far from the regional capital. Details about her early childhood are limited, but by all accounts she was a lively and spirited young girl. She was passionate about dancing and threw herself into sports, particularly volleyball, a discipline that taught her focus, teamwork, and how to push through adversity. After finishing school, she made the decision that countless young people from smaller communities make, she moved to the capital city to pursue higher education. She enrolled at the Buryat State University and graduated successfully in 2015. With her degree in hand, she registered as an independent entrepreneur and began offering eyelash extension services. Advertisements for that business could still be found online years later, a small digital footprint from an earlier chapter of her working life. She was someone who never stayed still for long. As she explored different directions, she eventually opened her children's clothing store in late 2022, hoping to build something more stable and lasting. Her personal life was one she shared openly and with evident pride. She had married during her university years and took the surname Bainova. She and her husband Boris had 2 sons together, Kirill and Alexander, who were 9 and 8 years old respectively at the time of their mother's disappearance. By every account, Seseg was a devoted and attentive mother. She documented her family life enthusiastically on social media, posting photographs from trips to Moscow, St. Petersburg, Turkey, Thailand, and Cuba. She had a flair for style and presentation, always photographed in fashionable clothing with careful, polished makeup. She loved going to the gym, spending evenings at local restaurants, and occasionally visiting karaoke bars and entertainment venues, though those who knew her consistently described her as someone who carried herself with grace and dignity regardless of the setting. Boris, by contrast, was a more private individual who rarely appeared in her public posts. He worked for an organization responsible for managing stray animals in the city, and prior to that had served in law enforcement. People who knew him described him as a supportive and caring husband. Those close to the family said the couple rarely argued, at least not in any way that was visible to others. When Seseg decided to enter the Mrs. Buryatia pageant, it felt like a natural next step for someone with her energy and presence. She moved through the preliminary rounds without difficulty. For 2 months leading up to the finale, she gave her social media followers a detailed look behind the scenes, sharing footage from rehearsals, masterclasses, photo shoots, and the slow, rewarding process of preparing for a national-level competition. On the night of April 7, she gave everything she had. She performed on stage, singing in front of a large audience, a personal dream she described as deeply meaningful to her. In a statement she delivered to the judges and the crowd, she spoke about what happiness meant to her. She said that her family, her husband, her children, and her loved ones were everything. She said she found joy in every new day and believed that each person deserved to fill their life with bright and meaningful experiences. The judges awarded her the Mrs. Top Model title unanimously. She left that evening with a crown, flowers, and a future that seemed full of possibility. 4 days later, those flowers had barely begun to fade when the news of her disappearance began to spread across the city. The first person to raise the alarm was Boris, who was still in Khabarovsk at the time. On April 12, he sent Seseg several photographs from his trip, the kind of casual check in that couple's exchange without thinking. She did not respond. As the hours passed without any word from her, concern began to grow. He reached out to her mother, asking her to go by the apartment and check on the family. The apartment was in the Gorky settlement, a neighborhood located on the outskirts of Ulan-Ude. When Seseg's mother arrived, she found the 2 young boys alone. There was no sign of Seseg, and no indication of where she had gone since the previous evening. Boris immediately booked a flight to Irkutsk and drove the rest of the way to Ulan-Ude by car. By the early morning of April 14, he was home, and by that point, family members had already reported Seseg's disappearance to police. Law enforcement responded quickly. They opened a formal missing persons investigation and began working to establish a timeline of Seseg's movements on the night she vanished. At the same time, word spread through community networks and social media. By the evening of April 12, missing persons notices featuring Seseg's photograph were circulating widely online. Volunteers from the search and rescue organization Lisa Alert, a well-known and respected civilian search group with chapters across Russia, joined the effort. Posters were distributed across the city. People made phone calls, shared posts, and gathered at designated meeting points to coordinate ground searches. Within days, more than 500 volunteers had committed their time to the effort. They fanned out across a wide geographic area, moving through the Vakhmistrov district, the Medvedchikovo settlement, the Sotnai neighborhoods, forested areas, and the banks of the local river. And then, in an industrial zone on the edges of the city, volunteers made a discovery that shifted the search from a missing persons case into something far more troubling. Beneath a mattress left on open ground, searchers found a collection of clothing items, both male and female. There were black women's stockings, a women's jacket, a men's jacket, a shirt, men's undergarments, and a sports bag. On the grass nearby, there were visible signs of a disturbance at the scene, stains that investigators would collect for forensic analysis. Inside the pocket of the men's jacket were 3 items that would prove immediately significant: a set of car keys for a Nissan vehicle, a set of apartment keys, and a driver's license belonging to Stanislav Arbov, 20 years old. It was through this discovery that Stanislav's name entered the investigation and the public conversation around Seseg's disappearance. Stanislav Arbov was, by all accounts from those who knew him, an unremarkable young man in the best possible sense. He had studied at the East Siberian State University of Technology and Management, where he completed a degree from the construction faculty. He played football recreationally, had served in the military, and had recently taken a position with a road management organization. His friends and family described him as calm, level-headed, someone who valued a healthy lifestyle and kept good company. He had a wide social circle and was well-liked. His mother recalled that in early April, shortly before his disappearance, he had come home one evening wearing his work clothes, received a phone call, changed into different clothing, and left in a good mood. He told her he was going to his apartment to rest. He did not say who had called. That was the last time she saw him. Stanislav had only recently moved out of his mother's home, having rented an apartment in the Satnai district in early April. He explained to his family that he was ready to build a new relationship and start a life of his own. Beyond that, he shared little about his personal circumstances. When investigators and family members began looking into the connection between Seseg and Stanislav, 2 distinct accounts emerged. According to Ekaterina, a close friend of Seseg's, the two had met approximately a week before the disappearance at a nightclub. As the venue was winding down for the evening, Stanislav had approached Seseg and invited her to dance. He later found her profile on social media and began sending her messages persistently. Seseg told her friend that she had not exchanged contact information with him at the club, but that he had tracked her down regardless and was pressing her to continue communicating. Ekaterina noted in an interview that Stanislav was aware Seseg was married and had children, and that his persistence, despite knowing this, had made her uneasy. Later details would complicate this picture further, with some sources suggesting the two may have had a prior acquaintance that extended beyond a single chance encounter, though the precise nature and timeline of their connection remained a matter of active investigation. On the night of April 11 into April 12, the industrial zone where the clothing and other items were discovered was not the only unusual event reported in the area. Local residents recalled that sometime during that same night, several structures in the vicinity caught fire. The fires were considered suspicious by some investigators, with the theory raised that they may have been deliberately set in order to destroy evidence near the scene. Then, in the days following, another deeply troubling development came to light. Someone had poured concrete over the location where Seseg's vehicle was believed to have been parked with its 3 occupants. The deliberate nature of that act, if confirmed, pointed toward a calculated effort to eliminate or conceal physical evidence. Seseg's Mitsubishi Outlander was eventually located not far from these events, left in a residential courtyard without its license plates and with evidence of a disturbance inside the vehicle. The license plates were missing. Investigators believed the car had been deliberately left in a location that fell within a blind spot for nearby surveillance cameras, a detail that suggested at least some degree of planning on the part of whoever was responsible. On April 17, the search operation expanded further. Hundreds of volunteers and emergency responders combed through areas along Domostroitelnaya Street, through the full extent of the industrial zone, through abandoned buildings, drainage gullies, wooded patches, and open fields. Search operations along the river were made more difficult by ice still present on the water during the early spring season, but teams persisted. By that point, more than 2,000 missing persons notices had been posted throughout the city, and investigators had spoken with a substantial number of witnesses and individuals connected to the case. Then came a development that surprised and frustrated many people who who had been closely following the search. The Lisa Alert volunteer organization, which had been central to coordinating the ground search effort, announced that it was pausing its active operations. The statement released by the group acknowledged the enormous amount of work their teams had done over 5 days, while noting that they remained prepared to follow up on new leads, respond to specific information, and conduct targeted searches when credible tips emerged. The announcement drew a sharp reaction online. Community members who had invested time, emotion, and energy into the search demanded explanations. Some questioned why the pause had come so quickly after the discovery of what appeared to be meaningful physical evidence. The Lisa Alert chapter eventually closed comments on their social media posts, citing ethical and procedural reasons related to the sensitivity of an ongoing investigation. In the weeks that followed, the search continued in a reduced form, carried out primarily by the families of the 2 missing individuals and their personal networks. Despite the difficult and emotionally exhausting circumstances, the relatives of Seseg and Stanislav chose to work together. Family members and close friends gathered after work and on weekends, walking through areas of interest, speaking with potential witnesses, and following up on any information that came their way. Seseg's aunt, Svetlana Medupova, described the situation in terms that were both heartbreaking and deeply human. She said that roughly 10 people were continuing the search consistently, that community members called regularly to ask for updates, and that many had offered their help in whatever form they could. She also revealed that the children, Seseg's 2 young sons, had been told only that their mother had gone away for a while. They were waiting for her to come home. Stanislav's mother, Nina Arbova, expressed a quiet and determined belief that her son was still alive. She said she would continue to hold on to that belief for as long as no evidence existed to tell her otherwise. On May 9, more than 4 weeks after Seseg's disappearance, authorities released an official public statement. Law enforcement confirmed that investigators had moved to treating the case as a suspected fatal incident rather than a simple missing person situation. The primary focus of the investigation had shifted toward identifying the individual who had been seen on surveillance footage entering Seseg's vehicle outside the Absolut shopping center. Forensic experts were working to enhance the quality of the surveillance recordings in order to obtain a clearer image of that person's face and physical characteristics. Investigators stated that the follow-up search and forensic work was continuing across multiple fronts. The official evidence on record at that stage included the items found beneath the mattress in the industrial zone, specifically the men's jacket containing Stanislav's identification, keys, and vehicle credentials. Additional items had also been located in the search area, including a pair of women's boots, an electronic cigarette device, and a knitted hat, though the formal connection of those objects to the case had not yet been confirmed publicly. The vehicle itself, the Mitsubishi Outlander registered to Seseg, remained a critical piece of evidence, with forensic testing underway on the material found inside it. The surveillance footage gathered from cameras across the city was being analyzed frame by frame to trace the route of the vehicle from the shopping center to its final known position. Then came a moment that briefly put the case in front of an audience far larger than Ulan Yud itself. A prominent national television program, the kind of talk show that covers human interest stories and unsolved cases for a broad Russian viewership, dedicated an episode to the disappearance of Seseg Bainova and Stanislav Arbov. The episode brought together relatives of the missing, commentary from outside analysts, and, most significantly, surveillance footage that had not previously been made public. The footage, captured by a camera covering a remote lot area, showed a vehicle resembling Seseg's Outlander pulling into an empty plot of land and coming to a stop. Several individuals could be seen exiting the car. What followed on the recording appeared to show a physical confrontation. One figure fell. Another appeared to drag something or someone away from the vehicle. The figure who had moved away returned to the car, which then left the area. Approximately 45 minutes later, the same vehicle or one nearly identical to it returned to the location. 2 additional figures approached the car shortly afterward. The headlights went dark, and the recording ended. Investigators confirmed that this footage was being treated as potentially significant evidence, though they declined to draw firm conclusions publicly given the quality and angle limitations of the recording. As the investigation progressed, detectives were able to establish several key facts that had not been confirmed earlier. They determined that the critical events had taken place along Damostroitelnaya Street in Ulan Yud. They established that approximately 24 hours after the night in question, a vehicle had been used to transport items or individuals from the original location to another destination. A witness who had reportedly had some form of direct contact or interaction with the individual believed to be responsible was identified, and from that witness, investigators were able to construct a composite description of the suspect. That description, along with working theories about the suspect's identity, became the basis for the most active phase of the investigation. Multiple theories had been discussed publicly and within investigative circles over the weeks since the disappearance. The first and most publicly visible involved Boris Bainov himself. The idea raised was that Boris, having become aware or suspicious of a relationship or interaction between his wife and Stanislav, might have been driven by that knowledge to act. Investigators acknowledged that this theory was being examined, and Boris confirmed publicly that he had been questioned by investigators on multiple occasions and had voluntarily submitted to a polygraph examination. He denied any involvement. Family members who reviewed Seseg's electronic devices stated that they found nothing in her messages or online activity that suggested infidelity or a secret relationship. Boris also noted that several details of his situation had been framed in a way he considered misleading, including the characterization of his work trip as suspicious. He pointed out that his travel was documented and verifiable, and that the nature of his employment, which involved coordinating animal control operations, sometimes required travel to locations far from home. The second theory focused on Stanislav himself. Under this version, he had developed an intense and one-sided attachment to Seseg and had arranged the encounter at the shopping center with harmful intent. Questions remained under this theory about who the third individual in the vehicle was and what role that person may have played. The third theory centered on financial pressure. Some sources suggested the possibility that Seseg had borrowed money from individuals connected to informal lending arrangements, possibly to fund her business or her participation in the beauty pageant. If she had been struggling to repay those funds, this could explain her efforts to generate extra income through ride-share work, and the message to Boris asking for grocery money may have reflected a cash flow problem. The presence of Stanislav in the vehicle, under this interpretation, might have been a precaution on Seseg's part, someone she trusted to accompany her to a potentially uncomfortable meeting. Investigators noted that this scenario presented logical complications, since individuals motivated by debt recovery are typically focused on recovering what is owed rather than causing irreversible harm to the person who owes them. A fourth theory suggested that Seseg had attracted unwanted attention following her public profile rise after the pageant, and that a dangerous individual had fixated on her in a way that ultimately led to the events of that night. A fifth and largely discounted theory held that the two had staged their own disappearances, but this was considered highly unlikely by nearly everyone familiar with the facts. Seseg's sons were waiting for her. Her family was in anguish. No credible evidence supported the notion that she would have left voluntarily. Investigators continued to appeal for public assistance and encouraged anyone with information, no matter how small or seemingly insignificant it might appear, to come forward. Forensic laboratories continued processing biological material and trace evidence collected from the industrial zone, from the vehicle, and from other locations visited during the search. Genetic analysis, fingerprint examination, and digital forensics were all cited as active components of the investigation. The case remained open. The families of and Stanislav continued to wait. In apartment, her 2